Brian Forsythe, guitarist extraordinaire from Kicks fame, and then obviously many other projects. We're going to talk about the Rhino Bucket. We're going to talk about your soundtrack work. We're going to talk about relocating as a musician, all of those kinds of things. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this interview with me. I've been a fan for years, so getting the opportunity to talk to you is going to be a real treat. What I like to do with all of these podcast interviews, as weird as it is I ask my guest to give us a bit of like a bullet point kind of introduction as to who Brian Forsythe is. I don't need your whole life story because we're going to dissect a lot of that, but basically, just give us some bullet points, what you've done, maybe what you're working on currently, so that the listener gets a bit of a better idea as to who you are during the course of today's interview.
Okay, I'll try. I'll try. uh, I'm a career musician. I've been uh, a professional musician since the 70s, 1970s. Um, and I don't know, it's like I've had a couple jobs here and there in between, but basically I've been playing music, um, you know, for my job. Um, so like the band Kicks, I had been with since the 70s. So that's pretty much, my whole life. I've been with that band, but I've also played with Rhino Bucket. I've played with I had a bunch of bands like during the 90s and then early 2000s. Um, I moved from the East Coast out to LA. So I played in a blues band. That's how I got hooked up with the guys from Rhino Bucket because the Reeve was the bass player for my blues band. But I played with this band called the Snake Handlers, which was a cool band. Um, there's a bunch of them. I remember at one point I was looking back at an old calendar, and I was in five bands at one time. This is what early 2000s.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I'm just a career musician. That's basically it.
Yeah, and listen, that is no small feat, as you would know. It's a tough road to travel. And
Yeah.
you at least had success with Kicks. Some people never even get that far. What makes Kicks such an interesting story for me is, at least when doing my research and reading about you over the years, and then this morning, revisiting your website and all these kinds of things, is it was almost like your first band straight out the bat had success. I know you weren't called Kicks straight away and that kind of thing, but that's almost unheard of, you know? So tell us a little bit about the backstory. How did you guys all meet? How did it go from, well, we jamming in a garage to we get a record deal and eventually you land up on the road for as long as you guys did?
Yeah. Well, Kix wasn't my first band. I played with a few bands before Kix came along. Well, sh the Shoes, as we were called at the beginning. Um, Everybody was sort of from the same area, so I knew those. Like I knew Donnie. I didn't know Donnie, but I'd seen his band play, and Jimmy play. Um, and Ronnie, I knew the best out of it, those guys at the beginning. Um, I used to go see Ronnie's bands, like several of his bands. In this one band that I was in, we had my bass player owned a PA system, which everybody wants the PA. So he used to rent his PA out, and Ronnie's band would rent it, and so my bass player would go run sound for them, and I'd ride along, and so that's how I got to know Ronnie.
Okay.
And um, yeah, it's just the weird kind of thing. Like, I see these guys playing in different bands, and then one night I was in between bands. I wasn't working. Um, I was coming home late one night from a club and I ran into Ronnie at a 7-Eleven and he asked me if I wanted to he was him and Donnie Purnell were starting a band. He wanted to know if I was interested. And and I wasn't at first because I didn't want to start like I wanted to jump into a band that was already had gigs. And this was starting from scratch. But the one thing he said was um, we want to write originals and get a record deal. And I never thought about that before. I mean, every band I was in, we'd have originals, but they were never good enough for a record deal. So anyway, uh, that's how that started. And I mean, that was the end of 77, and we didn't get Steve until early 79, maybe the end of 78. And then Jimmy came in shortly after that. So there was a while that we were playing and with different singers and a different drummer. Um, so yeah, so we were definitely paying our dues. It wasn't like we just boom.
Oh yeah, and I didn't mean that you didn't. Please don't get me wrong. That's the last thing I would try and insinuate. I was just meaning that when doing my research, it almost seemed that like once the decision to take this project seriously
Mhm.
had been made, things almost start to really happen. And again, taking a while, obviously, into account, but at least in my experience, a lot of bands they have so many breakups before anything even starts to happen. And I was fascinated by how problems within the Kicks camp didn't seem to happen until much later for you guys. Like once you were like in Japan and doing some of these other things, I was like, wow, that's a fair road to travel before you start noticing bumps in the road.
Right. Well, I think the core members were solid,
Yeah.
and we all had like that common goal. And so it was just like the drummer and the singer, that those positions we kind of, juggled those around until we found the right people.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that and another thing was yeah, we all had the same attitude. Like we put 100% into every show, no matter how many people were there or whatever what was happening. So like we really wanted this and we worked hard.
Let's talk a little bit more about this as a topic for a couple minutes. How important do you think band chemistry is in general? Especially like nowadays, you see a lot of bands, and bands I get, they aren't quite in the heyday era like they were. You know, nowadays it's more like you look at one guy and he's the band. You see bands changing members all the time now. And it's like it's become such commonplace. Not that it never happened, it did happen. But like that attitude of all for one, one for all, we're going to do this, we're trying to strive for the same goal, it doesn't seem as common as it once was, at least from an outside perspective. In your opinion, how important is chemistry amongst band members? How important is it for you to all have your goals aligned if you're trying to strive for success, etc., etc., etc.? Or do you feel that with the way that the industry is now set up, can one or two people pick up all the weight while other guys, let's call them sidemen, or eventually get viewed as sidemen, kind of just come along for the ride?
Well, a band that is like that has the one guy or two guys and the side guys. um, that's kind of though it seems like they've been set up like that from the beginning. Um, but a band like Kicks or bands like Kicks like Aerosmith, that has the band. Uh, the chemistry is important. I mean, not only do you have to get along, um, but well, also playing live on stage, there's got to be a chemistry. Because I remember a couple times, well, along the way, we had to let Ronnie go a couple times, and when he's not there, you can tell, even though the other guy's great, and he does a great job. Um, well, except for we ended up getting Bob at the end to replace Ronnie and Bob. So he actually filled the spot pretty good. But you know, there is I don't know. It's hard to explain, but yeah, I think chemistry is really important. I mean, because basically, especially when you're traveling on the road all together, it's like a family, and there's always going to be tension, I guess, but some bands it's just a lot of tension. Like reading stories about Aerosmith, it's just I'm surprised they lasted that long, you know.
Yeah, that's quite something. And even just the relationship, the dynamic between Joe and Steven, it's like there's so much history there, you know.
Hmm.
It's quite something. So my next question might seem a little bit redundant.
Okay.
What would you suggest to bands who maybe haven't had the opportunity to yet spend months on end on the road together on trying to develop chemistry? You know, because again, you see a lot of guys who treat this like, oh, I'm going to go to band practice, I'm going to go to my gig, and then I leave the gig straight away, and I leave band practice straight away. I never hang out with the guys. I never, they don't seem to know each other. They play together and then they stay away from each other. If there was any advice that you could potentially offer to up and coming bands or band members on trying to develop camaraderie amongst each other, what would it be?
Wow. uh I've never the chemistry in Kicks especially was always there. So I never felt like it had to be developed. So that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, the best way to do it is do a European tour in a little, little sprinter van. That'll you'll get to know the guys real quick.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. All right, well, we've alluded to touring a couple times, and I
Uh,
know that you guys were in small vans before eventually getting a bus, etc., etc., etc. So I want to sort of segue a few questions tour-wise here from this topic. First one is, have you got any cool road stories that you'd be willing to potentially share a few with us?
uh, I've been asked this before, and it's like there's so many. It's hard to think of there's the ones that I always talk about, but I mean, uh with Kicks, we didn't I mean, there was only maybe a year and a half where we had tour buses.
Yeah.
The rest of it was traveling in a van with a rider truck following us with the gear. And so there was a lot of that. But there was a lot of late night drives, overnight drives, and switching off drivers and stopping on the side of the road to take a leak. Um, man, some of the funniest though were like we'd be down south, like South Carolina, and they have these big fireworks stores. They're like big super stores. And we'd stop along the road as we're traveling, and we'd just go in there and just load up on fireworks. And then we'd stop on the side of the road, and at some point, like when we're stopping to pee or something, we'd set a bunch of them off. And a couple times uh it was always me. I don't know why, but mine always went wrong. And one time I set the median strip on fire, and another time I set this field on fire. And we thought for sure, we were going to burn down some person's farm. So
Yeah.
we tried to stomp it out, but it got away from us, and it was like just roaring fire. And we just jumped back in the van and took off. And I was like, the next day I was watching the news. I thought for sure there would be something on the news about it, but never heard anything about it.
Wow. Maybe you had a career in pyrotechnics developing, you know?
Yeah. Well, you get bored and you find things to do.
Yeah. Well, that actually leads me to my next question. Um, did you ever have any kind of, I don't want to call it routines, but any kind of things that you would do for yourself while on the road, maybe away from the band and the guys and stuff, to just, try and enjoy the experience more away from playing. So away from playing, like things that maybe you did to keep your mental states in a good place, things that maybe you did to stay healthy, or things that you tried to, be present in the moment of at the time, rather than just kind of having that blur of we land in Carolina, we drive in the night, we land in wherever else, we drive in the night. Like, was there anything you did to try and stay sane, basically?
Um, yeah, I mean, that's kind of evolved over the years. In the early years, we used to share hotel rooms, so it was hard to get away. Uh, um, yeah, and it was different before I got sober too, because I just there would be just giant parties and all that. But one thing though that Ronnie and I used to do back in the 80s, we'd be like in the middle of nowhere. I'd always like this was before internet or cell phones or anything, so I'd always get a phone book and search through it for thrift shops,
Cool.
and we'd go thrift shop clothing shopping. But
That's
that's
kind of ahead of your time if you consider how fashionable that's become now.
Yeah,
Um,
well, I've been doing it. I mean, that's
yeah,
that's that's the way I used to dress. Everything I had was just from a thrift shop.
amazing, man. Okay, so we're going to fast forward a little bit. By like 92, 93, you start to kind of potentially feel a few bumps in the road with the band, and you inform the guys that you're going to be leaving. You start making a couple trips to LA, you start putting your own band together, making some different demos, etc., etc., etc. Again, I'm sure you've answered this question many times, but talk to me about trying to make a decision like that, especially when, okay, yes, you can see maybe the writings on the wall within the group, or at least you're feeling those feelings. But again, from an outside perspective, the band is now pretty successful. You're doing well, you've got rotation on the videos, the records are selling. I can only imagine what that's like mental wise. Like that's a conflict, right? On one hand, you're like, I should stay because we're doing all this stuff. On the other hand, well, I want to do this other stuff and I think things are going a certain way. Super devil angel on the shoulder situation. So where was your head at, and how do you come to that decision?
Well, the thing was, that was right after Hotwire, and I expected Hotwire. I thought because of the success of Blow My Fuse, Hotwire was going to be bigger. I thought we were on that trajectory. Um, and when that didn't happen, I knew it wasn't going to happen. It was slowly going back down the way, it's like we just came all the way up this hill and then we're going back down. And I knew that, the venues would go from big to smaller and I couldn't at that point. I think I'd had enough. And that was only one part of it. I mean, there was some problems with Donnie and stuff. So that just made it an easier decision. And I felt like, well, it's hard to describe that, in the way that decision. I was on stage one night and it was, a great show and everything, but all of a sudden it hit me that I was just going through the motions. And and I think that, and there's a couple little incidences, in those last couple of years that just it made it more easier to make that decision. But I didn't really fully commit to leaving until I'd put that other band together and I'd heard our demo and I said, "Oh, that's what I want to do." It wasn't like I want to do this, so I'm going to leave to do it. It's like I wanted to make sure I was covered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, again, not to dwell on this particular time in your life, I know that a few ups and downs happen. And again, I want to try and maybe dissect a few potential questions out of this period. You do a few things though, over the next few years. I mean, you get Rhino Bucket happening, you appear on numerous soundtracks, the Snake Handlers, as you alluded to earlier. Quite a lot of stuff eventually leading to Kicks reunions and all these kinds of things. The questions that I want to derive from this particular period, and again, I say this period as if it's so easy to make it black and white. I'm fully aware it's not. We're talking about a person's life here and several years at that we're trying to condense into a few minutes. But
Hmm.
the first question would be, having these peaks and troughs, and then the leave in, and then some more peaks and troughs, etc., etc., etc. What do you think has been the hardest part about being a career musician?
Um, well, at first the travel didn't bug me at first, but after a while that gets to you. Um, just being away from home. Luckily, I don't have any children or anything, but I've had pets along the way, and it's just I don't know. The older I get too, the worse it is. It's like I leave and I think about, my cat or my dog, and it just tears my heart out. I'm, I'm boarding a plane and I get to my seat and I sit there and I go, oh man, it's weird. And like, I still have family in Maryland and where Kix is based. So those last few years, a lot of my flights were up to Baltimore, and I'd stay at my sister's house. So I like would have a family there, and then a family back here, and you're just torn between two places all the time.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the hardest parts.
I agree. When you go through some of these ups and downs of the leaving, and then you have a few years with a few things happen, what inspires or drives you to keep going even through the hard times?
Oh, well, that's easy. No, I'm just one of those people. I always want to see what's over the next mountain. So I'm not one to give up. And there's been a few times like before Kicks came along where I was struggling like between bands, but something always comes along, eventually. Uh, yeah, I'm just not one to give up. And the same way with when I first started to learn to play guitar, I went through I wasn't one of those guys that picked up the guitar and within a year I'm playing. It just took a while. Like it didn't feel natural to me, and I had to work at it. So I don't know. I've always had that kind of thing where I won't give up until I get it.
Good attribute to have. Okay, and my last question from this particular topic is, I saw that there were quite a few soundtracks and TV things that either your music had been involved with, or it seemed as though maybe you had music for, or I don't know all the ins and outs. So if I'm slightly incorrect here, please, I do apologize. But what is the difference in the process when working on something that has to do with the soundtrack versus working on something like just simply recording an album? Or were the soundtrack situations them taking certain songs, using them for those soundtracks?
Well, different. different projects were different. I mean, there's a few along the way that they just used the song that was going to be on the record or that was already recorded. Um, but there was one of the more fun projects was right when I first joined Rhino Bucket, and we got an offer to do this, well, two soundtracks. It was crazy right off the bat. Uh, this one indie film, well, they're both indie films actually. Um, it's one called Blood, Sweat, and Beers, which was I don't even know if it ever came out anywhere except for YouTube, but that was a fun project, and that actually led to the recording of our first record
Oh,
because we, recording stuff for that, and then the second thing we got was this this movie called what was it called? Rolling Kansas with Thomas Hayden Church. He
oh,
directed it, and he was a big Kix Rhino Bucket fan. So and that project was fun because we were in the studio with doing playing to a scene,
oh, cool.
and I got to do a lot of in between guitar little things.
Yeah,
So that was a lot of fun. I'd love to be able to do that again.
that's amazing, man.
There's also been I did some stuff, I do stuff at home too, just on the computer, and then I just send it off.
Yeah. That actually is a great segue to my next question because obviously a lot has changed in the music business since you've had your career. You've seen a lot of different decades here. Um,
Oh yeah.
so again, I've got a couple questions that I want to try and derive with that in mind. And my first one would be, what are your overall thoughts on the influence of things like social media within the music industry? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Do you think it makes it too saturated? Do you think that good bands maybe don't get recognized because they don't have the numbers? Just in general, have you got any kind of thoughts on the whole topic?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's good. I mean, I think it- after Kicks got back together, this social media thing really helped to get things going again. But in other ways, it seems oversaturated with anyone can do anything. Anyone can make a video or a post or I don't know. I'm not really good with taking advantage. Like there's probably way more that I could do with it, but yeah, it's weird. Like back when first started, there was vinyl records. That's it. And now, like, you now they're like CDs, or even people don't buy those anymore, and it's weird. But in on the other hand, someone can sit at their home if they're good at Pro Tools or whatever they have on their computer, and they can make a professional sounding thing right there at their home, and then send it out. It's like you don't even need a record company, it
Yeah,
seems like.
yeah, it's true.
It's weird. I still haven't gotten used to it.
I do agree. It's strange. Like I saw a video yesterday. I mean, it was highly entertaining, but I saw a
Mhm.
guy playing rubber chickens. Like, those squeezy rubber chickens? He
Right.
was squeezing them to the melody of, I can't even remember what song. And this video had like several million views. There's some guys who are like killer, killer, killer musicians. And I'm not saying that he isn't. Maybe he is. But I was just like, man, I don't know, hey. It's a weird, weird thing. There's no better word for it.
I know, and speaking of numbers, uh, I didn't, I never really paid attention to them. And I remember at one point, oh man, it's been a while. It's been about 10 or 15 years now. Um, Gibson approached me. They wanted to do maybe a signature guitar
Awesome.
and of my melody maker. And I met with the guy. We met for coffee and I brought my guitar with me to show him. And he took pictures and stuff and then he asked me the question, how are your numbers? On Twitter and on, Instagram. And I go, I don't know. And I think that killed the deal.
Wow.
Um, and another thing that didn't help was Slash had a guitar coming out that year, so
Yeah, that doesn't help.
no.
What about, a similar related topic? What about AI? You're living in the songwriting capital of the world. Do you notice that a lot of people are starting to use any of the AI platforms for writing over there at the moment? Or is that still just like a taboo thing?
I don't know. You know,
Amazing.
and AI is so weird. I still occasionally I'll get tricked. I'll see
Yeah.
a post, an AI video or a photo or something, and at first, fall for it, and then I go, wait a minute, that's not real. So it's kind of scary. I don't, you'd wonder if people are using it to write songs, especially like commercials and stuff where you don't really have to be creative.
Yeah, and the question, at least in my mind, is how do the royalties work on that? Does it come
Um,
down to the person who's prompting the idea? Do
I
they then
don't.
get any kind of royalty? Because like that, I don't know, it seems like a blurry line. And if anyone's listening to this interview that can clear that up for me, please drop me a DM because I would love to know. Anyway, okay, my other music related question. If you had the power to change one thing in the music industry in a positive way, or improve one aspect of the music industry in a positive way, what do you think it would be?
Um, to pay the musicians the royalties that they deserve. Like, you look at your statement and you'll like from Spotify or something, and there'll be 17,000 plays, and then you look at the royalty amount and it'll be 0.002 you know cents.
Yeah, it's
That's one thing. I don't know. Well, it's always been a little weird, but it got weirder, you know. There's so many different now there's so many different ways that, there's record companies and there's the streaming and there's this and that and it's all over the place and everybody has a different way of calculating things and yeah, if we could just keep
yeah.
track. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it would be quite the difference maker. Even if all the people still took their piece, right? As long as you
Mhm.
could see the number, because like it's like you say, when you see these numbers of, oh, here's whatever many thousand, and oh, we sold a few records this month, and oh, we got this one show, and then from the show we gained 1,000 listeners on Spotify or whatever the case was. There's no way to keep track of it all. It
Yeah.
becomes very diluted because there's so much. It's kind of fucked up because in a perfect world you would focus on one and do it really well. It's like learning guitar. You'd
Mhm.
focus on that until you can do it really well. But now it's like if you're not present on all of these different platforms, it's almost like certain users of certain platforms don't even realize you exist because, well, I use this and I don't use, say, whatever this platform is, but my friend does and they don't use that. And it's like so crossed over and weird. It's weird is the word of the day, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely the word
Exactly.
of the day. All right, Brian. So obviously, Maryland, and then you live in Los Angeles for many years, and now
Hmm.
you're in Nashville. It kind of paints this picture of the life of a musician who possibly is going where the scenes are. I don't know what led you to say Nashville per se, but it's a great music city.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get your thoughts on how important you feel location is for a musician. And then after that, talk me through some advice that you could offer musicians on how they could best go about networking and meeting people if they move into a new place.
Well, I don't think the location is that important, like especially these days, you know, with Zoom and you know, but unless you're just starting out and you want a bunch of guys to play with, sometimes location would help you because yeah, I mean phew, I couldn't imagine trying to start a band these days. But anyway, uh it's slim pickings in the middle of nowhere. It- you know, um, yeah, as far as like myself, when I moved from the East Coast to LA, I think uh, I don't know if I had that in mind. I must have. I'm trying to think. I mean, the band that I was putting together was out there, for one thing, and I had two brothers that lived out there. So, I moved out and started working for my brother at first to get on my feet, and and I don't think I could have done it like if I would have stayed in the area on the East Coast. But as far as moving here, I'd been in LA for 26 years, and my girlfriend, my, um, at the time, when at the end there, we kind of split up, and she owned the house, so uh, I had to find a place to live, and I started looking around, and it was like, man, all this time, I was just paying. Well, I thought I was paying part of the mortgage, but I was paying rent really. Um, and for for well, she owned a nice house, and the rent that I was paying there wouldn't even I couldn't even get a one bedroom apartment for, and so so I started looking around. Several of my friends moved here to Nashville like over the last few years, and they kept saying, "Oh man, you should check out Nashville." So I dove into that, and it was a really quick thing too, because I January of 2019, I flew out here for a week, and well beforehand I had gone on like Zillow and all these real estate sites, so I made a list of places. Like I wasn't sure, it's hard to just look at a picture of a house because you got to go to the neighborhood and see where it is. But so I had a list of places to check out when I came here. So I took a week and hooked up with this realtor, and we just drove around, and I had this list of at least about 20 houses, and we went to every one of them. And finally this house that I bought was the last one that we looked at, and it was a very fairly new listing. It had just got listed like 3 days beforehand, and that was my main motivation, was because I wanted to. I didn't, I didn't want to just pay rent for some apartment and then years down the road have nothing to show for it. So that was one of my motivations for coming here. And I knew a lot of people that lived here, and the music scene, everything, sort of it's the same reason I left the East Coast at first. I was like a multiple, there's multiple reasons. But I don't know. It was weird too, because the first year that I was here, that the pandemic hit. So I was just getting used to going out and checking out bands and venues, and making friends, and all of a sudden, boom, everything stopped, and I was just home. So that was a little weird, but
Especially when you've lived a life that takes you away from home for so long. And then you're
yeah.
suddenly forced to be home. What did you find yourself doing with the time?
Well, I when I moved here, my girlfriend out in LA had several cats, and her father had died like a year or two before that. So we ended up with her father's cat. So it was sort of like the odd cat. Like it didn't really fit in with the rest of them. So she suggested that I take the cat. So I think that was the coolest thing because I kind of got time, had time to bond with the cat and enjoy my house, and uh, and I ended up doing cooking videos, and I learned how to like use a well, I started out with this little smoker, one of those kind of you put charcoal in, and then I advanced to a better smoker, but I learned to do all that stuff during the pandemic. And I built a sort of a home gym down in my garage.
Amazing.
So yeah, if it wasn't, I had time to deal with stuff. It
Yeah.
just it was funny because at first it felt like I had all the time in the world. And then I filled in everything, and then all of a sudden I had all these things I was doing. But
That's amazing. Brian, I have one last question for you, man, and that is either or both, if you like. What is the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to your music career? Or what is something you've learnt along your own journey that might serve as good advice for somebody who's aspiring to have a music career?
hmm, um, well, one thing I've observed, if you really want to make it, and it depends on what you're in it for. If you're just in it for the money, then that's a different thing. But if you want a career and you really, eh, I've found that if you just create from your heart and don't worry about the audience, like just do it for yourself. um there's something about that. It's yeah, like take for example a band like the Black Crows. When they came out, there wasn't like that was kind of a odd kind of a sound. It was a rootsy sound, but at that time, like the music scene wasn't like that. And because they were doing it, they were just playing for themselves. It comes across as true and and heartfelt and all that. And that's what I feel like. If you want to make it, just do that and not give up, and also the universe will get behind you if it's true, if it's really, from your heart, and push it along.
Brian Forsythe from Rhino Bucket, Kicks, just the Snake Handlers. So many cool bands, man. Again, I can't thank you enough for your time. I wish you nothing but success in your future endeavors. And just thanks for all the inspiration and the music over the years, man. It's truly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Peace.